Hello, welcome to my classroom. Today we will study soil architecture. That means formation, how the soil is formed. In fact, I should say that the soil, what you see in the nature, it is in fact aggregated soil. If I say that soil is formed of three type of particles: sand, silt and clay. But you can never see sand, silt and clay as individual particles under natural conditions. So it is in aggregated form. So I just correlate this soil, what you say under natural conditions, with a house. You know, a house is made of bricks. So bricks are basically the soil particles. The bricks are joined together by cement, and that cement in the soil is organic matter. So organic matter and other chemicals, they join soil particles together, and then in between the soil particles you have spaces, like you have spaces in your house. So similarly, this soil is formed of, I should say, solids, then liquids and then gases. So if I say that soil in fact is a three-phase system. So in this three-phase system, first is soil solids, and we call this as lithosphere, what you already know, lithosphere. And these are in fact, solids are the particles. Which particles? Sand, silt and clay. Okay. Then you have soil liquids, and liquids here comprises mainly of water. That's why we call it as hydrosphere. And in fact, this water in the soil is not fresh water, it is a solution, soil solution, because you have dissolved nutrients in it. And then third phase is gases. And like you have the gases in the atmosphere, air is comprised of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, water vapor. Similarly, in the soil air comprises of all these gases, and thus you can call it as atmosphere. So basically now the soil is an combination of lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere. And if I say that microbial population, microbes are also there in the soil, then you have what you call as bigger animals like earthworms, rodents in the soil. Then you can have another phase, what you call as biosphere. So in fact, all these four, lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, biosphere, so these constitute the soil and what you call as pedosphere. So now if just we see that in an ideal soil, what is the composition of solids, liquids, gases? So I will try to explain it in the form of a pie chart. 50%, around 50% of the space, soil, whole volume of the soil is comprised of soil solids, and soil solids may contain mineral matter. This is around 45%. I am saying this for an ideal soil, ideal composition, and then 5% is organic matter. Generally, we don't have 5% organic matter in most of tropical soils. In Punjab or northern India, the amount of organic matter is around 0.3, 0.4, 0.5%, except under temperate conditions like you have in Leh Ladakh. The organic matter could be as high as 3 to 4%. Then similarly in Himachal Pradesh, in some places in temperate areas where the temperatures are very low, the organic matter could be as high as 5%, 6%. but in most of the tropical soils, subtropical soils, the organic matter is very, very low. Then rest of the 50% of the volume of the soil is comprised of soil water, I should say 25%, and soil air, rest 25%. This is ideal composition. And here you see, you know why I made this clink, because if soil air increases, soil water will decrease. If soil water increases, soil air will decrease. So these two phases in fact depend on each other. So though I have written over here soil as a 3-phase system, you can also say that soil has 4 phases: mineral matter, organic matter, then soil water, soil air. Now just briefly we will discuss about, first of all, mineral matter, and then organic matter, and then water and air. So first of all, mineral matter. As I say, mineral matter comprises of soil particles. So we have 3 types of soil particles: sand, silt and clay, and we can differentiate these soil particles based on their size. Sand particles, they range between the size 2 to 0.02 millimeter, and then silt is 0.02 to 0.002 millimeters, and then clay less than 0.002 millimeter. Those are called clay particles. This is one how you can differentiate the particles on the basis of their size. Since these are the biggest particles, you can see the individual sand particles with the naked eye. You cannot see individual silt particles with naked eye, but these silt particles individually, these can be seen with the help of a microscope. But the clay particles will not be visible even under a microscope. You require an electron microscope to see a clay particle. And second thing is that if you have to differentiate physically these 3 type of particles, so you have before you sand particles, silt particles and clay particles, and then your eyes are closed. You are asked to identify that in which pot you have sand, in which pot you have silt, in which pot you have clay. So you will first of all start feeling these particles with your thumb and forefinger. So if the particles feel gritty between thumb and forefinger, you can immediately say that these are sand, these particles. But at the same time, if I ask you that what will be the feeling of clay particles, so most of you will say it will be very fine, very just like talcum powder, soft. No, the feel of dry clay particles again will be gritty. Why? Because the clay particles are charged particles, they are colloidal particles, they never exist as individual particles. So they join together immediately to form a bigger particles. That's why those clay particles also seem to be gritty when these are dry. So now the question is then how to differentiate between sand and clay particles, because both these particles, they feel gritty between thumb and finger. So the next step is that you take some particles in your mouth maybe, and then feel the grittiness under your teeth. If still these are gritty, then you are sure that these are sand particles. But when you feel this grittiness under teeth and you don't feel any grittiness, rather these particles, when they become wet in your mouth, so the feeling is just like sticky feeling, you can say okay, these are clay particles. Now remains silt particles. The silt particles, when you feel it in dry condition, so these will be just like the talcum powder. All of you know how the talcum powder feels. So this is how you can identify sand, silt and clay particles. And as I told you, under natural conditions, you don't have these existence of soil particles as individual particles. So those are present as combination of sand, silt and clay particles. We call these as aggregates, or you can call these as secondary particles. And here these are the primary particles. So the primary particles, they get joined together with the help of cementing agents, like you have organic matter, you have sesqui oxides, iron and aluminium oxides, hydroxides, which bind the particles. Even clay itself acts as a binding agent. So by these different binding agents, these particles, they join together to form the aggregates. So proportion of these primary particles present in a particular soil, we call this as soil texture. So what is soil texture now? The proportion of primary particles present in the soil. So like you say, we generally say that this is sandy loam soil, this is loamy sand soil, this is clay soil. So that is based on the amount of sand, silt and clay particles. Just a brief introduction to different nomenclature of the soil based on its texture. I can say that broadly you can say soils are based on texture. These are of three types: sandy soils, then loam soils, and I should say instead of sandy, let me call it as coarse textured soils, then medium textured soils, and then you have fine textured soils. So in coarse, the next broad classification can be sandy. You can call it as sand and sandy. There is difference between sand and sandy. Sand means 100% sand dominated by sand particles. Sandy means dominant particles are sand, but then there may be some other particles. Then medium textured soils, we call these as loams, and fine textured soil, we call it as clay soils generally. Now here, first of all, this is now the sand having 100%, but this is very rare that you find 100% sand, except in deserts, dry deserts in Rajasthan. There, but nothing grows over there particularly. You cannot grow any crop because it is 100% sand. And then you can have loamy sand. That means here the sand is dominating. Up to 90, 94, 95% of the particles, they comprise of sand particles, and the rest could be silt or loam, silt or clay. Then that's why we call sandy, loamy sand. Then in medium category we have sandy loams. In fact, this is the largest or broadest category of the soil particles, sandy loam. Here again, the sand content is less than what we have in loamy sand. Here sand is less, so clay and silt content increases, but still the range of sand may be as low as 50%, as high as 80%. So it's a quite broad group. And in fine texture, then we have silt loam, we have clay loam. Before clay loam, we can have silty clay loam and then clay loam. So as I am going down, the clay content is increasing, and then ultimately it could be silty, it could be clay. So this is just a broad classification. Otherwise, if you have proportion of three particles, sand, silt and clay, so we have a textural triangle. Here we have % sand, then % silt, then % clay. Then you have different categories formed over here. You can find this table very easily it can be found in the books, and these are in fact the compartments of, say, this is sandy loam. I'm just giving you an example, otherwise this may not be. So if it is clay, it could be clay loam, something like that. So what you have to do, out of the 3 particles you can take any 2, sand silt, silt clay, or clay sand, and then locate, for example, say you have clay particles, locate the clay percentage over here, move towards right side, horizontal to parallel to the silt line, then you have percent silt, you locate percent silt, move upwards, and where these 2 lines cross, that gives us the texture of the soil. So this is about the mineral matter. Then coming to the organic matter present in the soil. So organic matter in the soil is in fact combination of decomposed and undecomposed residues of plants and animals. So next is organic matter. So this could be the decomposed or undecomposed residues of plants and or animals, because you are constantly adding organic matter, or it is getting added into the soil continuously. So some part could be decomposed fully, and when we say decomposed fully, the end product is called as humus. So humus in fact is the more resistant part of organic matter present in the soil, but it does not mean that humus will not get further decomposed. It also gets decomposed, but the rate of decomposition is very slow. So that's why we say that it is the end product, though it is not exactly the end product. Its color could be black, its color could be brown, depending upon the type of organic matter you are adding into the soil. And the organic matter, in fact, this has to be continuously added into the soil. If I say that it is lifeline of the soil, so this may not be false, because it is only because of the organic matter that under natural conditions the nutrients are being supplied to the plants. And if you have good amount of organic carbon, organic matter in the soil, you need not add artificial nutrients. At the same time, since organic matter gets decomposed into the soil, this is in fact a sink, very good sink for sequestration of carbon into the soil. And this is what the plants in fact are doing, this is what the animals are doing. Now plants, they are capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Through the process of photosynthesis, these convert carbon dioxide into this biomass or carbohydrates, and when the crop plant matures, you take out the produce, and the rest of the residues should go back into the soil. But unfortunately, and this is what we call as carbon cycle. Nature has provided us a carbon cycle. So that goes back into the soil. Again, when you sow the seed, the plants come up, again they capture. So whatever carbon dioxide is captured from the atmosphere, it is stored in the soil in the form of organic matter or humus. But unfortunately, now we have disturbed the carbon cycle, we are burning all the crop residues. So whatever crop residue could have gone back into the soil, maybe after 6 months, maybe after 2 years, maybe after 5 years, depending upon the conditions, we are just burning it and sending it back into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide, rather some carbon monoxide also, within few hours. So that's why we have disturbed the carbon cycle, and this is why the climate change is there. Rather, we are increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So anyhow, then as I said, this is food for microorganisms. That's why I'm saying it's lifeline. Just in my previous lecture, I explained that why microorganisms are important. They could transform nutrient from one form to another form, from organic to inorganic, so that it is available to the plants. But for this, for their working, you require humus, you require organic matter. So this is very important, and organic matter is the only source of nitrogen in the soil, and it is good source of phosphorus and sulfur. Potash in fact comes from the soil minerals. Then coming to the next component, that is water, soil water. You know, as I said that soil is very good sink for sequestration of carbon dioxide into the soil. Similarly, soil is very good reservoir of water whenever rains are there. You know, big trees, when rain is not there, when dry season is there, still these trees, they don't require any irrigation. You don't irrigate those trees growing on the hillsides. For example, this tree growing over here, it's a big jamun tree. So from where it's getting moisture? It is getting moisture from the stored moisture in the soil. So soil is very big reservoir of water, and that water is in fact stored in the soil. And you know, the plants are continuously evaporating water from leaf surfaces, what you call as transpiration, and that transpiration is a continuous process. But rains are not a continuous process. Rains may occur for 2 months, for 3 months, or maybe for another month during Rabi winter season. So still the plants, they get moisture from the soil, and at the same time soil water is also important for the availability of nutrients. As I told you, plants take up nutrients from the soil in solution form. So it is very important that the nutrients come, if water is not there, the solution form will not be there and it will not be taken up by the plant. And this is also true that all the water present in the soil may not be available to the plants. We will discuss this in next topic, that why all the water may not be available to the plants. Then coming to the next last component, that is soil air. Soil air, as I said, just like atmosphere air, we have soil air, we have oxygen in the soil air, we have carbon dioxide in the soil air, we have moisture, water vapors in the soil air, we have other gases in the soil air. But this is in fact, the composition is quite variable, and it is different from what the atmospheric air composition is. For example, oxygen content in the soil, it may not be more than 5 to 10%. And it could be even lower when you go deep into the soil. But in the atmosphere, you know, organic, this oxygen content is 21%. Similarly, carbon dioxide in the soil, it is around 0.3%. And in the atmosphere, it is 0.03%. Now you see, it is around 10 times higher carbon dioxide in the soil, because roots are continuously breathing and roots exhale carbon dioxide into the soil. And whenever the soil moisture increases, the carbon dioxide content also increases and oxygen content decreases. So moisture, as I said, water vapors are quite variable in the soil. In dry conditions, the water vapor may be less, in wet conditions it could be more. So another thing is that how these 4 phases or 4 components of soils, they vary with soil depth, variation with soil depth. So first of all, what will happen to mineral matter with depth? Will it increase or decrease? Can't say. So what will happen to organic matter? Will it increase or decrease? Yes, this is important. Organic matter always increases as you go down into the soil. Why? Because whatever organic matter is added, that is added in the surface layers. Even the root mass, that also is dominant in the surface layers. So as you go down, organic carbon decreases, and if organic carbon decreases down the depth of the soil, then what should happen to mineral matter? Mineral matter will increase. So mineral matter increases with depth, organic matter decreases with depth. What should happen to soil water as you go deep into the soil? Yes, it should increase. It increases with depth. Generally the surface layers could be dry, but as you go down, the moisture content increases. And If I ask air, so this is quite clear that if water increases down the depth, what should happen to air? It should decrease. So as you go down into the soil, air decreases. So this is how the soil components, 3 phases of soil, they vary with soil depth. So we will stop over here today. Thank you very much.